Hello parents and carers, and in fact anyone else that's interested in supporting their child through preparing for revision and examinations. I'm Mr Ben Abbott. I'm the Deputy Headteacher in charge of quality of education, and the idea of this session is to run through some simple tips, some advice, some guidance to be able to support your child through being able to make sure that they can be as successful as they possibly can with their upcoming examinations. At Heathcote, we fully appreciate that preparing for any form of assessment, test, mock or real examination comes with its degrees of stress and anxiety and concerns, both for the child themselves and any parent or carer. I think it's really important to make sure that we have a network, an open network across both the school that supports the child, understanding that the teachers are there to support and enable the child and the pupil to do their very best, and that you as a parent and carer can do some really simple, straightforward things that will support them with revision. The basics can actually really be quite fundamental. Talk to your child, find out what they're feeling about, find out where their stresses, their anxieties are, try and understand some of those pressure points. I fully appreciate that being a parent carer can sometimes comes with its own degrees of stresses and strains, especially with young teenagers, and actually understanding where their anxieties lie can hopefully start to at least pave the way for conversation around how you might be able to support them. Support them if you can with enabling them to have a quiet and distraction-free place to work. I can tell you now that even with the best minds in the world, I don't think anyone can really engage in their learning if they're distracted by their phones, their computer games, and all devices that cause some of these modern day distractions. So as much as they tell you that they can do their work with their earphones in or whilst playing on their PlayStations and Xboxes, please try and encourage them to create a distraction-free place to work. Encourage them to get a good diet, a good well-balanced diet, a healthy diet that supports their nutritional values, their needs, and also ensuring that they have a decent place to make sure that they have time to rest. That's not just about the amount of sleep, but that's also just making sure that they don't exhaust themselves by thinking that revision is constant and continuous. Help them be organised and try and create a situation where they have a work-life balance, where we can reward them if we know that they've been trying really hard and working really hard with their revision. I'm going to try a little experiment now, and it's a bit of an experiment in understanding how we engage in learning and also engage our memory. Ultimately, the process of revision is about retaining information and being able to use that retained information and regurgitate it in an examination situation. If you're not interested in this, please by all means skip to slide 9. That will enable you to carry on with the rest of the presentation. But the idea of this exercise is to really understand how the memory works. If you are interested, what I'm going to do now is expose you to a series of names. And the idea of the task is, without recording these or writing these down, I want you to try and remember as many as you can. So I'm going to read the names out and all you're going to do is hear them. What I'd like you to then do is spend some time trying to recount as many names as you possibly can. And you can either write them down or just do that verbally. Okay, so we're going to make a start. The names are Ian, Izzy, Alistair, Sally, Nina, Tina, Sam, Bridget, Anne, Celia, Utish, Kai, Marcus, Jazzy, Aaron, Izzy, Milton, Ollie, Mohammed and Sarah. Okay, it's over to you. How many of those names that I've just read out can you remember? Okay, so how did you do? Hopefully you were able to recount at least a few of those names, and you may see where this is going, but the idea is that we're going to now build on our memory and our retention. So the next slide I'm about to show you, you're going to be able to visually see the names as I read them out. Once I've ended the slide, I'd then like you again to recount as many names as you possibly can, and hopefully from the first round of names that you had, you can improve your score. Okay, so round 2, here we go. The names are Ian, Izzy, Alistair, Sally, Nina, Tina, Sam, Bridget, Anne, Celia, Utish, Kai, Marcus, Jazzy, Izzy, Aaron, Milton, Ollie, Mohammed and Sarah. How many names can you now recall? Okay, so I asked that question again. How did you do? And hopefully parent carers are still with me and enjoying this process, or at least seeing potentially where this might be going. Now, the idea is that hopefully your retention and memory is starting to increase, and with exposure of both the visual and the verbal, you've hopefully improved your score. What we're about to do on the next slide actually is a way of compartmentalizing and actually ordering the information that you have. You've been exposed to X number of random names that you've never heard before. In the first instance, you only heard them verbally, and then after 10 seconds, you were expected to remember them. You've then had a second chance at it, a second bite at the apple, and you've been exposed. Oh, there's our school bell. That's lovely. You've been exposed to both the names visually and verbally. And what I'm going to do now finally is they're going to be alphabetized, color coordinated, and in different sections. So hopefully that might help us process the order. Okay, so I promise this is the third and final time you are exposed to these names and a chance to retain and remember as many of them as you possibly can. Hopefully you can see them on screen in both the colour and also the organisation. They've been arranged in alphabetical order. And what you can see is that there's a certain number within a section of the alphabet. So the names that we have in blue are Aaron, Alistair, Anne, Bridget and Celia. The names we have in the red are Ian, Izzy, Jazzy and Kai. The names we have in the green are Marcus Milton, Mohammed, Nina and Ollie. And then finally, the names in the blue and the pink, Sally, Sam, Sarah, Tina and Utish. Cover over the slide now, and as the final effort, see how many of these names you can recall. Okay, so hopefully the sort of test process exercise is over and nobody feels under too much angst or anxiety around that. And it was just a bit of fun. But what it hopefully sort of explores and exposes you to is the fact that actually that information that you received initially is really difficult to retain. And what I'm hoping is that your memory gradually improved and you were able to recall more and more names as you were exposed to them. There's two things going on there. The more you repeat something, the more likely you are to retain it. So that's a really important tool to know, that actually repetition is a fundamental act of remembering something. The second thing is actually the way in which you expose yourself to information can be really important. And our teachers at Heathcote are really adept at making sure that we review and retain as much information as we possibly can in the way that we deliver our lessons. But equally, revision has an important part to play in that process. And equally, the way in which you revise is really important. And I think it's about dispersing of some of those myths, that actually sitting upstairs, reading over your notes for hours and hours and hours is productive. For some people that may be the case, but I would argue for the vast majority, you need to be mindful of the way in which you retain and process the information. Hopefully, for most of you, actually by seeing the names in both alphabetical order and also a colour order, in a sense of order, enabled you to visualise and also recognise verbally those names and recall a lot more. I would argue actually the best way to revise that number of names wouldn't be to try and do them all in one fell swoop. I would in fact argue that the best way to do it would be to spend 20 minutes just focusing purely on the blue group, the A's to the C's. Aaron, Alistair, Anne, Bridget, Celia. And almost in my head, just repeat and repeat. Maybe write them down, cover them over. How many can I remember? Aaron, Alistair, Anne, Bridget, Celia. It should almost become sort of second nature. And actually, before I move on to any of the other groups, I should master that simple group of blue names, those 5 names, Aaron, Alistair, Anne, Bridget, Celia. What I then do is start to build. I then start to go on to the next group. Ian, Izzy, Jazzy, Kai. Again, write them down. Can I test myself? Ian, Izzy, Jazzy, Kai. Okay, right. Now build that on top of Aaron, Alistair, and Bridget, Celia. I know I'm sort of almost patronising in some sort of way, and please don't think that that's the case. But again, thinking about how you build this into your revision, obviously for the Year 11 GCSEs, for the Key Stage 5 A-levels and BTECs, it's not about remembering names, but you're certainly going to be remembering information. And those small chunks can be really helpful. So just in case you were wondering, the previous slide didn't have a voiceover on it, but the point of it is that we do need to expose ourselves sometimes 3 or 4 times to new material to have any reasonable chance of learning it. Now, your child will have been exposed to the material previously in their lessons, but actually the process of remembering it is all about how you review, implement some sort of testing regime or some sort of way of retaining it, and then keep continually reviewing it. And actually this typicality curve is quite a kind of complex piece of science, but it actually illustrates that the more time you spend between not reviewing something, the more likely you are to forget. So actually it's about breaking those things down into small chunks, just focusing on the blue names, focusing on those key names, Aaron, Alistair, and Bridget Celia, and then coming back to them maybe 5 minutes later, 10 minutes later, a day later, ensuring that that sticks. Once it's stuck, there's a real good chance that it stays there. So this typicality curve is really important in understanding the process of revision and how we go about doing it. Okay, so hopefully you're still with me, and hopefully this is still very useful to you. Just in terms of another piece of stats, I think it's really important, and I make no apologies if you've seen this slide before in any of my other presentations, or in fact I'd like to hope and think that your child has seen this slide before, but it is really important to understand how we remember. And you can see there the increased chances of retaining and remembering information has a better chance of success the more we involve the senses, the more we involve perhaps even other people. And this would be my first tip, actually, as a parent carer, how you can engage in revision with your child and supporting revision with your child is to actually try and experience some of that process with them. We're not expecting you to sit the GCSEs or the A-levels or the BTECs, but what we would like you to do is try and encourage that dialogue. Can your child actually teach you something about what it might be in their geography specification? You don't necessarily need to know it, but if they can teach you and they have the confidence to talk to you about it, then actually the processes of metacognition is that they're explaining it. And by explaining it, they're starting to hopefully retain it as well. The more you can get involved in the senses, again, is really important. Sitting there just reading doesn't necessarily benefit. And I would encourage your child and yourself to access other information of revision. So they'll have their textbooks, they'll have their exercise books, they'll have their Google Classroom where a lot of the revision and resources and support is housed. But the internet is vast. Things like BBC Bitesize are a great resource for supporting. And actually there'll be podcasts, there'll be videos that support a lot of the content, a lot of the information that will be needed to be revised for the examinations. And that would be a really useful tip in supporting your child. Okay, I made reference to this in the start of the presentation, and I think actually some of the examples that we did previously, and especially the remembering or the retention curve, does tend to support the idea that reading alone doesn't just guarantee retention that you need. So examinations, as we discussed, is all about retaining information, having that memory to be able to recall it under exam situations. One thing I would definitely encourage, and it's about now getting into really good habits, is understanding that actually mobile devices, whilst they have their place, and actually in some way, shape or form can be used to support revision a lot of times, you need to have that trust and that dialogue with your child that actually the mobile phone isn't becoming a distraction. Okay, if it is required for the revision, great, and if you've got that trust, brilliant. But if they've got a situation where their environment means that they're distracted because every 2 minutes there's a Twitter feed coming up, or their WhatsApp is coming up, or their mobile phone bleeps because there's a text, or that there's a new Xbox game coming out that's going to entice them and distract them. Again, those are circumstances that I would really encourage the family to avoid, and to try and make sure that actually their workspace is organised so that they've got a base to revise. And actually understanding that maybe just 20 minutes of designated quality revision without an interruption from Twitter, without an interruption from their Facebook or Instagram or whatever it might be, is really beneficial. And it might be that then the reward is 5 minutes of Instagram time at the end of your 20 minutes. If it's productive brain time, if it's productive quality work time, then hopefully then they earn that reward. Okay, so hopefully we've started to dispel the myth that revision is just one way of doing something. There's more than one way to do things, and actually different things will work for different people, and this is the time and the opportunity now to explore those different avenues. The school is a massive resource in itself. We have intervention sessions, we have the lessons themselves, which provide high quality teaching, quality first teaching that enables pupils to be supported. But as we've discussed as well, revision needs to happen. And it's about getting into good habits. I'm going to talk in a bit about revision timetables and how they can support being organised. But about understanding the best time of the day to work is also really important. I'm very much a morning person, and I find my brain is best early in the morning. So actually, I'm very good at getting up very, very early, doing the tasks that I need to do while my brain's alert and alive. And then actually by the late afternoon into the evening, I'm then actually not at my best. So it's important that I do my most productive work and my most important work first thing in the morning. Understanding that is a really important part of the process, because actually if you are doing work when you feel laboured or feel tired or feel lethargic, then actually again you're not using your time effectively, and it's not smart time. Some basic things that we know we can do: breaking it down into small chunks. It can seem really imposing to do 10, 11, whatever it is, subjects all in one go. Break it down into small chunks and break the subjects down into small chunks. Okay, each subject will have certain areas, certain modules that will be required for certain assessments, for certain tests, for certain exams. Understanding that each one of those needs to be broken down, just like we broke down the names. Rather than trying to learn 20 names all in one fell swoop, just focus on a small group. Master that small group. It will give you confidence. Okay, it will give your child confidence, and hopefully once they've retained it and got it really cemented in there, then they can move on in the knowledge that it's secure, deep down memory, and actually they can retain it when they need to. Some basic things are actually, when you're reading through your text, reading is helpful, but make it active. Start to highlight text, write down key words, encourage the use of sticky notes if you need to make your environment, your learning environment, interactive. You could make a quiz for your child, or your child could make a quiz for you. Okay, actually encourage them to involve themselves in their peers with revision. Their peers will be going through the same process. They'll have the same understanding and knowledge of the anxieties and stresses that sometimes go with this. So maybe that can be an opportunity to ease some of that. A big tip is to not always leave your subjects that you struggle with most until last. Okay, it's often the case, isn't it, when we're doing the housework or whatever, that we put away the tasks that we don't really want to do until the end, and actually then it becomes a bit of a burden. Okay, focus when you're actually at your very best on tackling some of the things that you might have the most challenge with or the most struggle with. Actually, because then when you're at your very best and when your brain's working at the very best and it's the most productive, then that will hopefully help it. Okay, so hopefully we've talked about some simple tips, some simple ideas, some simple notions around the process of revision and understanding how revision might work for your child, certainly understanding how they might remember things and how their memory might work. Some basic ideas that I would encourage, actually, with their mobile phone devices. We've said that we want to try and avoid them being a distraction, but actually they're a good resource in terms of being able to record things. So actually they could record their own voice, they could read out their notes, and possibly that's one method of way in which they could engage the mobile phone device to record and listen back to things. Actually, that really works well. We've talked about quizzes being supported by either groups within the school, within their peer network, or within the family. We've got a huge resource in the internet. We know that's there. Encourage them to diversify their research, to diversify their resources, because that is a vast and helpful way of doing things. And YouTube itself has got oodles and oodles of sites that support with revision. And I'd ask you to use things like Parents' Evening to contact the subject teachers to actually ask, what sites are best for the modules they're looking at or the specification that we're doing. Okay, where's the best resource that we can find? I don't make any excuses again for using the terminology repetition, because that is a really important part of it. It may become mundane, and there's no bones about it. Revision is hard work. It's not easy. It's not fun and games. It's not a field of roses. But what it is it is an enabling tool to be as successful as you possibly can be with your exams. So actually, that repetition, whilst it might seem to start to get annoying, actually is a real beneficial factor. And what I would ask is that start having that conversation with your child, and your child start having that conversation with the teachers, the support network that we've got. Not just the teaching staff, the support staff that we have in the school, their own friends, and you as parents and carers. If we can have that dialogue and open it up, then hopefully we're in a better place. So the previous two slides, I guess, were just visuals, just to be thinking about in terms of what sort of workspace or what sort of environment would you be happiest or most productive at in working. And I'd like to think that everyone would agree that the more organised you can be in terms of your workspace, the more chances you've got of sticking to your revision and sticking to your regime. Now, I can't lie, one of my biggest faults as a pupil myself, way back, was spending hours and hours beautifully modifying the most immaculate revision timetable, colour coordinated, columns. It looked spectacular. The problem was I was spending hours and hours on my revision timetable making it and not actually either sticking to it or following it. So one of the fundamental things about being organised, yes, organise your workspace. That's a simple task. That shouldn't take days and days and days, and that shouldn't be something that then becomes a distraction. It's something that should be set up, and it should be habitual that actually that workspace is a designated zone for revision. That could be in school even, but just knowing that you've got a place that's a sanctitude where your revision is a sanctuary is really important. The revision timetable does help, but it only helps if you understand how we work. There's no point in putting all 24 hours of the day down as revision. There's no point in thinking that that's going to happen. There's no point thinking as well that you can necessarily revise for hours and hours and hours without designated breaks or designated support time. I talk to pupils when I'm talking about revision, actually about thinking about the positives first and working backwards. Plot in what it is you like doing. Okay, if you know that on a Tuesday after school that you've got your football club or you've got your swimming lessons or whatever it might be, then there's no point pretending that you're going to be able to do any revision in that time. If you know that on a Saturday actually you do like to go out shopping, or that you do like to spend time with family, or that actually you do want to spend some time on your Xbox, then so be it. Put that in first. Plot actually realistically when you have your rest time, because rest is really important. Then start to work backwards. Start to think about the subjects that you struggle in most, okay, and plot those subjects in the times and the areas that you work best, okay. You might already have intervention or tutoring taking place. Again, they should be fundamental and already in place. But what I would ask you to do is, if you're planning on producing a revision timetable, is think about making sure that there's equity across your subjects. So don't always stick all the subjects in and forget a couple of the others. And actually keep a tally of over the course of the week, over the course of however you structure your revision timetable. And we have many templates and supports, resources that are both available in school and also available on the internet. But actually keep a tally of how much time you're spending on your subject so you don't leave others short. There will be perhaps a disparity in certain subjects, because certain subjects may be more coursework orientated, which will require work, but it will require the manual doing time, as opposed to subjects that might require a bit more of the revision process in terms of it. But I would certainly encourage both pupils, parents and carers to engage themselves in a revision timetable that works for them, that they can stick to, that creates a habit, because habits hopefully then become embedded and it becomes normal and it enables them to do the very best. Okay, this is the last bit from me, and I hope you found this useful. I am available during parents' evenings for drop-in sessions to support one-to-one discussions around how revision can help. I'm also more than happy to field any conversations or questions about how you might be able to help your child during revision, even if it's the simple things that we're looking at now, actually how you look after them. We've talked about making sure that they get rest. We've talked about making sure that we put the right things inside them. I don't wish to sort of soil the conversation too much, but the episode of The In-Betweeners, where he's filling himself full of energy drinks, doesn't exactly end too well if anybody's seen that. What I would encourage is actually that we feed our children with positives in every sense of the word. Positive encouragement, positive energy, positive workspace, positive rest and sleep, but also positive foods that we know both create healthy well-being, but also actually help to increase the brain power. We know that fish, broccoli and blueberries help and support that. And I've encouraged a link there from the BBC about brain power boosting foods. So try and enable to support them, okay? being up all night the night before an exam isn't effective. It might mean that they're going tired into the exam or the test or the assessment, and that's not good. I know it can be difficult at times and there can be stresses and anxieties, but if we can plan ahead, if we can get organised now, hopefully that can alleviate some of those issues. I'd like to end by wishing everybody a really happy and healthy revision period. I know that sounds sort of almost a bit of an oxymoron, but the process, if it's done well, can support your child, and it can really enable them to feel like they're going into the exams in a positive mindset to do their very best. At Heathcote, we're here to support in whatever way we can. We've got all levels of support, from the subject teachers themselves, the heads of departments, their form tutors, the heads of year, the department leads. All these people, alongside school leaders, will hopefully be able to support your child through the coming months. I wish them the very best in whatever form of test, examination or assessment they take, and I wish you, as parents and carers, the very best. Thank you for your time listening today.